Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast,
the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education.
The goal is to provide meaningful conversations to what is currently happening in our classrooms.
Stories, pains,
moments of success.
We want to hear it all.
Hey friends, welcome back to Under the Hat. We are super excited to be here. As always, I'm your co-host, Steve Martinez, and I'm joined by...
Sophie, you're the co-host.
Yay. Yeah, so this is going to be an exciting conversation, and we're really looking forward to diving into content discussion that I feel we haven't really dived into, and so really excited to be chatting about that.
Yes, I'm really excited about the power of play in the classroom, and not just for preschool kids. What's top of mind for us is the power of play in the classroom. We have Dan Thomas with us today, a retired STEM educator and a Lego serious play facilitator with over 30 years of experience in the trenches. Personally, I'm a huge fan of his daily jokes on socials and the way that he adds some sparkle to education through his work with Lego bricks. He's the host of the EdTech Clubhouse podcast and a true expert in project-based learning, maybe rivaling Steve here. So welcome, Dan. Could you expand a little bit on your educational journey for our listeners?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad you guys reached out and asked me to be on the show. I am a recently retired, I phrase it as a recovering middle school teacher. I taught middle school STEM for 32 years. Down the road where I went to school. So I applied for one job, I got the job, and I never left the school, which is really weird nowadays in education or just about anywhere. But I was the guy that was allowed to kind of play with everything and try some stuff out and really have some fun in the classroom.
That sounds fantastic. I was always the one that wanted to play with everything, but was told not to.
Right.
Yeah. I get the whole like recovering middle school teacher. I was a middle school teacher too. Steve was high school. But yeah, so we talked about in your intro about your that you were a STEM educator. So what sort of really cool projects do you like look back on fondly?
Well, back in the day, I've always done the typical STEM projects, your bridges, your catapults, your mousetrap cars, all those typical things we did. When I started, it was things like I had a shop set up, right? So we had bandsaws and table saws, and slowly that morphed into other things. But I was always like really focused on what went into creating the project, right? Because that was nice about it too, is everybody built something different. Still solved the problem, but everybody built something different. So we started doing that, and then I just started playing with a little bit of computer science, and I started bringing that in, and then a little video production. It just, I was the guy in the school that like played with the stuff and then like worked the bugs out and then sent it to somebody else. So I did a little bit of everything. And, and to Steve's there, I taught some high school too. So basically everything in my department at one point or another, I taught. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah. Love that. I love what resonates with me is like this concept of, they're all building something different with the same goal, end game in mind. That's just how the world works, right? Like we're going to have different perspectives and how we solve things.
I mean, if we're looking at what teachers do, that's what we do on a daily basis. My wife works in private and works in the private sector. And she does accounting and stuff like that. But and even her, she does those things on a daily basis where we're solving problems, where we're, nothing goes according to the book ever. Right. And if it does, then something's going to happen.
Yeah, that resonates with me. The whole like nothing ever goes according to plan. You got to have that skill to like pivot, problem solve, and keep going.
Absolutely.
So Dan, I'm a little unfamiliar with something that's in your bio, and I would love to hear more about it. Certified Lego. So that's something I'm not familiar with. Super interested in hearing more about that. And yeah, if you can just elaborate.
Okay, there's a couple things there with that too. So first, I'm a certified Lego Serious Play trainer, which is basically it's things like, I always have my Lego bricks around. I'm actually playing with them now, and but what that does is it kind of it's a way to build that conversation in. So there's that. So like I could go into a school and talk to a group of teachers, and through the play with Lego bricks, it becomes a medium of how do you initiate a conversation versus that icebreaker,
Mm.
like, hey, say one fun fact about yourself, which we all love as teachers, or
Oh,
just
so
about any
much.
oh yeah, everybody loves, two truths and a lie type of things. Um, but so there's that. So I got trained in that, so I can go around and talk to teachers about that, and industry. I mean, it starts it's a business. It's a private sector business model for teamwork and stuff like that. Just stuff I really did in class. The other side of that is one of my things I picked up post COVID was I work with Lego Education as a contractor,
Mm.
and I get to go into school districts that buy Lego education products. And if they buy a PD session, I get to go in and teach teachers how to play with the Lego bricks and the Lego sets that they have and how to implement them in the classroom. And when I'm doing both of those, I love to bring in the fact, and this is kind of like my underlying philosophy, right? I want you to be able to do something with it tomorrow, because we've all done that PD session. We've all done that workshop where, and, you talked about FETC. We all saw a ton of stuff there. But when I go back to my classroom Monday morning, you forget what did Steve say? What was that Sophie's tip
Mm.
that, and then you just go back to doing what you were doing. My whole thing is I want something simple enough and low floor enough that they could use it tomorrow, knowing that it's probably going to be difficult and it's not going to go perfect, but they have the confidence to be able to do that. So I kind of tie all that stuff together because it really, really, really both those things and the whole Lego education focus on play and hands on really fit with what I was doing. I just didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah. And just and I was talking about this week actually with my pre-service candidates about like just the concept of play and how the kids do less play as they get older. And sometimes that's like a cultural thing. Sometimes it's like, this, that, or the other. But part of it's like the education system generally, right? Like just giving them less opportunity to continue that play. And it was
Yeah,
just like a real
absolutely.
conversation. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think we and this isn't my own phrase, but cemetery rows. You walk into a classroom, you walk into the workshops we did or the sessions we did at FETC, and you see the desks lined up in cemetery rows.
Mm.
Everybody's straight and everybody's, it's teachers in the front, because that's what we expect.
Right.
My classroom
That
wasn't
was
set up
sort
that
of
way.
that was sort of the factory model that we were given when we
Absolutely.
were growing up, sort of thing. And so people are still imitating that because it's what they think is going to happen.
Well,
Yeah, and your
and I
classroom
think
wasn't like that.
no, I think a lot of teachers. There's a couple thoughts on that I have on that. One, some teachers, and I don't want to single anybody out, and I don't want to say you're doing it wrong, but some teachers don't want to give up that control of. They don't want the chaos in the classroom. They don't want the loud classroom. Um, and on the flip side of that, they're so hammered with I got to cover this standard, I got to put my objectives on the board, what's my learning target, I'm getting observed, and I got to cover this, cover versus learn, and cover versus discover, I guess is how it's phrased.
Mm.
So I think a lot of teachers are so inundated with mandates and requirements and whatever new initiatives coming down from state admin, whatever it is, that they have to cover these things. And they just, at the end of the day, kids don't come to school to watch us work,
Right.
No.
right? Even though we want to think they do. The only people we really go watch work are our actors and our athletes. Those
Mm.
are the people we want to watch work. right? You're not going to go sit in an accountant's office and watch them, balance a spreadsheet.
I mean, I might.
And I stole that one from my daughter's swim coach. My daughter was a competitive swimmer, and I was sitting on the pool deck with him one day, and I coach sports too. I coach football and golf and basketball and swimming. I did a little bit of everything, because I had a hard time sitting on the sidelines watching people do it wrong. But that's another story. But at any rate, I'm sitting on the pool deck with my daughter's coach, and he goes, why do these kids come to swim practice? Because if you've ever swam, it's a tough sport. It's a team sport, but it's very individual, because your face is in the water staring at the line for 2 hours, and you're doing 6,000 yards, and they, we go to work, we do things like this, we go to conferences, and kids come to school because that's where their friends are. Because that at the big one, and part of it too is, for school, that might be the only place they get a hot meal, that might be the only place they get a hug, a place to get some positive reinforcement. But they come to school because that's where their friends are, and mom and dad make them, or whomever, and it's the law. But other than that, so yeah, that's part of that.
Yeah. There's one line that you said that really like stood out to me, and that was like the concept of, you said like the difference between cover and learning, or cover discovery, and that just took me back to when I was in the social studies classroom, because that was something that, I'm sure it's like this in other states, but like, if you teach world history in California, like the concepts are very big picture and conceptual, and there's certain things that you definitely go deep on, right? Like, you hit the French Revolution really hard, right? Like you need to hit the causes of the First World War, and like the nuances there. And then there's other things like, oh, we're just covering this, and it's almost just like, why do it besides the fact that you have to, if that's all it's going to be? And that was kind of just a good like reflection kind of moment for me as I thinking back on how I was doing all that.
Yeah, I stole, and here's another thing, because teachers love to steal and borrow things.
Yes.
Along those lines, Steve, that's where like my STEM class and kind of things I took for granted. You talked about the big picture and the concepts and stuff like that. But as a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old or wherever class you're in, however old you are, we as adults have knowledge of the First World War. We have knowledge of the French Revolution. I can't remember a lot of it, but I know about it. So if we started talking about the First World War and how that started, we'd have some working knowledge, whereas a kid doesn't. So that's where that discover part of it comes in. And I like to start class, and this is kind of like my little platform right now, is let's do an activity before we hit that content. Like, let's do something, and I like to get my hands dirty with stuff. I call it getting hands dirty, but we're going to play with our hands. We're going to do something. And that could be sketching, that could be building with Lego, that could be whatever, right? Making a video, whatever it is, TikToks. But let's do an activity about war, for example, right? I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but then let's talk about, okay, how did this war start? And maybe we do something where we do start with like a gang fight, a fight between kids in school. What would you do? Because I mean, that's kind of how World War I started, if I remember right. There was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, initiated it all, and there's a backstory there. I'm glad I know that. Wow.
You get the start,
you're doing,
Dan.
You're doing better than me, Dan.
So we do an activity, and now that 12-year-old kid has, and I go back to 12-year-olds because that's what I taught. That 12-year-old kid now has an idea to anchor that concept to. He has something physical, maybe something tangible that he or she can anchor that to. And now that they have that, now we can attach vocabulary to it. Right. So now that vocabulary has meaning and context. Whereas a lot of what we were taught as teachers, maybe you guys, because my undergrad teaching was very old school shop related, and that's another story for another day. we were taught to front load vocabulary. Hey, let's make a list of these vocabulary words. These are and then let's look for these as we go. But those vocabulary words don't mean anything to a 12-year-old who has no idea what an archduke is, right?
Yeah.
You know, and that's where I think like things like AI can come in handy with that. Like if we're going to talk about the impetus of World War I can throw that as a history teacher into Chat GPT, Magic School, School AI, pick your poison there, and say, hey, how can I make this relevant to a kid in California or a kid in Jamestown, New York? You know, what's going on in my school that I can do a little 5-minute bell ringer activity that's going to relate this topic to what they're already feeling. You know, because that makes it real and relevant to the kids, and then they own it. And then what also is going to happen too at the end of the day, once that final comes around, or in New York State when we hit our regents and things like that, those kids are going to score better because they own the learning with it, right? As opposed to just regurgitating it on a Friday exam.
Yeah. And it'll stick with them longer. They're like the retention will stick with them longer because it is relevant and connected to something that they can draw back on. Yeah.
So Dan, I'm just curious because like I feel like you and I taught similarly. Like there's a lot of what you say that just like, oh yeah, like love that and really resonates with me. What so people ask me this like often, but like the way that we teach, especially from the PBL lens, like what do you feel was the most valuable skill that your kids got from you?
Well, you know, that's a great question because there's a lot actually underneath there. And I think, you know, you're hitting that PBL piece and doing a hands-on project. And again, it could be in a social studies classroom. It could be in a math classroom, whatever, or a STEM classroom like mine. But those kids are going to remember that. And you're going to learn some things that you can't explicitly teach in a classroom. You're going to learn how to collaborate, right? We're not going to walk into a classroom on Monday morning and say, hey, today we're going to learn about collaboration. But if you do a PBL project, that's built in, right?
Yep.
You know, you're going to get stuck. You're going to have to develop your own answers. You're going to have to do some research. Your things are going to not work properly. So you're going to learn a little bit of grit and some perseverance. You know, we talk about these, their 21st century skills is what they used to be called. But I mean, it's 2026. Come on, we're a fourth.
Yeah.
I heard the phrase durable skills, right? And I'm like, that is what we need to teach our kids. Because the information, like if I wanted to, going back to the World War I example, if I wanted to find out more about that, I can just throw that into Google. I can probably find a YouTube video. I can probably, you know, throw it into a Chat GPT or something and get some quality feedback and some quality information on it. So what's the point of doing that? Let's work with that, and then through a project or through a some type of, and it could be even like I saw Kalo Haslam at FETC in the Brisk booth doing a D&D a Dungeons and Dragons campaign virtually through Brisk, and I'm like, that is amazing. Why couldn't you do that with World War I? Right?
Right.
So that's what that kid's going to remember. And now all of a sudden, if they own that, come test time, they're going to be able to decipher that question a little bit more and kind of read between the lines, so to speak. So I think that the skills that, going back to Steve's question, which is, this is a long answer. What do the kids learn? Grit and perseverance, you know, and thinking.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You know,
I love that answer. Yeah. I love that answer. And Sophie dropped it in the chat, just kind of shows how well she knows me and sees me present on PBL. But like, my answer is always like teaching kids how to ask good questions and the right questions.
That's actually my answer.
Well, that's the answer that I've given often, Sophie.
Easy,
but yes,
easy.
Like, yeah.
Do I have to separate you two?
Sorry, Dan. So that's what happens around here sometimes.
But yeah, so my classroom, I taught math, so it's not as, like, it's not, in my experience, it's not as easy to do project-based learning for every single standard,
No.
but it is so much easier to do math with project-based learning. And I did a lot of cross-curricular activities, and I did one of the hands down, my favorite strategy that I learned in my first 3 years of teaching that I continued and still do to this day is I don't answer their questions with an answer.
No.
Yep.
I ask them questions to guide them down the right path.
And they
and
hate that.
they hate it, but then
that. But they love it.
eventually they get it. And my favorite time is like, is this answer right? And I'm like, I don't know. Is it? And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, did you check it?
Right.
And they're like, so then it's putting it back and it's building their own confidence too, because they're like, okay, let me think through this. And I did do a lot of collaboration. My desks were in weird rows or then groups. They taught each other and they talked through the math. It was so fun. But that's putting the learning back on them and having them do more than what you're doing. If you walk out of your classroom and you're the only one tired,
yes,
you're doing it right. And you're the only one tired, you're not doing it right. So asking good questions, learning what questions to ask, I would say, to answer Steve's question, even though it wasn't mine, that would be what my kids
If you
learned.
don't see frustration in the classroom, right, you need to see frustration in the classroom. You need to see maybe a little bit of anxiety. I mean, it's not a bad thing. You need to see a little bit, you need to see struggle. You need to see failure. And in my classroom, on top of that, not only do we celebrate the awesome successes because that's what you do, sometimes we celebrated the epic failures too, because something just blew up and it didn't work and it was hilarious. And as long as nobody got hurt, right? I mean, we didn't play with like explosives and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you know, when the kid epically fails on a catapult or a mousetrap car that goes backwards, like, yeah, you know, you fell walking down the hallway one day too, right? You tripped going up the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I equate it being a sports coach, and I think teachers need to go and see their sports coaches and their musical people and their art people in the classroom. A professional baseball player, Major League Baseball player, is, if he's up to bat, 1 for 3, a 300 average is phenomenal, which means that 2 out of the 3 times he's up getting paid multi-million dollars, he fails, right? 2 out of the 3 times he fails, or 3 out of 4, right? And we got to normalize that.
Yeah. And then it's not just like, I would say this to my kids too, because math was one of those, all the kids come in with math anxiety. Yeah. And I would say to my students too, whatever season it was, that baseball player didn't just walk up to that home base to bat and immediately bat that well. He practiced. He made mistakes. He got it wrong. And that's what you need to do with math too. You've got to try before you can just, so many of them are just like, I don't even want to try. I'm going to fail. Like, you already set yourself up for failure.
Yeah, you know, and I think that's why I recommend, I did a session there at FETC and I told the people, I'm like, go to football practice, go sit in basketball practice, right? So many times we get like, hey, these kids should know how to write, or these kids should know how to set up a math problem. Go to your football practice, go to basketball practice and watch the basketball players shooting free throws for 20 minutes before practice starts, right? You think that should be automatic, although Shaq couldn't, you know, hit the backboard sometimes, you know, but you know, he did okay for himself. But, you know, but those little things like that, the repeated practice and the perseverance, and right. And I think you need to take a look at what's going on in those other classes. And, you know, I'm not saying bring everything in from that, but again, going back to before, why does a kid join the football team? Why does a kid in the musical? Why is a kid in the band? Right. Because that's where their friends are.
Because where their friends are.
And you know, going to that band analogy, if you're an elementary teacher, walk past that orchestra room when they're learning to play the violin. It probably sounds not good. But then you go to the concert at the, you know, when they're in middle school and all of a sudden that kid can play. Why? Because they practiced and they did it over and they did the fundamentals and the little things. One of the things I had on my board, besides plant corn, get corn, was from Bill Walsh, who was the head coach for the San Francisco 49ers back in the 80s. And he says, take care of the little things and the big things take care of themselves. Right. So if you take care of the little day-to-day things that you can do, you know what, that test at the end of the year is going to take care of itself. But if you're focusing on that output, right, if you're focusing on that project or that essay or that math problem, but you miss doing the little steps in between, it's not going to work. Sorry, I got a little deep there.
So no. This is great. When as we're diving into all this, like, to me, the elephant in the room is like and when I say we, I mean like as a country, I guess, but like just our fixation on the standardized test, right? Like, just that fixation has kept us from achieving largely what you're talking about.
Yeah, we're so focused right now on product. We're so focused on what is that output piece that we're going to get. And again, in school, does it really matter what that output piece is, right? Like I get frustrated this time of year now that it's being tax season and it's the beginning of, and I'm going to see, oh, Mark's safe from doing the Pythagorean theorem today. I'm glad I learned that instead of how do I do my taxes, right? I can't tell you the last time I wrote a poem, right? But I had to write a poem, and it's the process, right? I use the Pythagorean theorem all the time. I built a deck. I refurbished a house, right? So I had to figure out some things that I didn't have, and I had to figure out area and square footage. And then going back to like what Sophie with math, I had a kid a couple of years ago that didn't want to do area and volume, right? Just wouldn't do it. He was capable, but I'll tell you, and I told the math teacher, I'm like, you got to make it relevant. And I said, because in 5 years, this kid's going to be out pouring concrete with his dad and stand at the end of your driveway and be able to figure out the volume and the cubic yards of concrete you're going to need to pour your driveway and do it all in his head and give you a quote right there. So why can't he do it here? Because it doesn't have meaning to him. That's not applicable. And how hard is that now in the age of AI?
Like, there's so much that I would have been able to do if I had AI in the math classroom to make it extremely relevant, excuse me, for every single student in that room. Like, for example, my son is obsessed with Mario right now. Bowser, Yoshi, anything to do with Mario. You do any activity with Mario, especially with Bowser in it, he's going to do it.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you do it?
Right. And the kid next to him might be infatuated with dinosaurs. So you could create a worksheet with dinosaurs and another worksheet or a scenario with Mario and Luigi attacking the dinosaurs.
Right.
So you could
blend it all together.
Right.
I love it.
Love to do that cross-curricular piece. I always hit up my math or science teachers and social studies and English. I'm like, they read, what was it? The Giver? I think it was The Giver they read in 7th grade. And I think that's the book I'm thinking of, where the kid creates contraptions and stuff like that in the book. I don't remember off the top of my head. And I'm like, okay, well, let's bring that kid in and say, what would this kid create in this scenario? And so we're pulling in content like as a special area, even as a core 4, you could bring in content, from the other classes. STEM, math, and science really tie well together. So but we both, we need to write and talk and share ideas. So there's your ELA component, and there's got to be a history behind it. So there's your, how was it used in, maybe they're doing medieval Europe, and I could build catapults while they're doing medieval Europe and talk about how the siege engine was used to attack a castle, and then we have some fun with it, right? So we played cornhole actually with our catapults. They got
nice.
chasing ping pong balls around. So I bought little bean bags, and I made a quarter scale cornhole board. So we played cornhole.
That's fantastic.
And we still learned the physics of it, and we still learned how to, because it wasn't necessarily about physics either. It wasn't necessarily about simple machines, but hey, it's going to break. How do I adjust my catapult to hit that target repeatedly? So those are the thought, because they're going to solve problems. Information's right there, right? Information's right there at their fingertips and their phones on their devices. But how can I unless, like Sophie said, how do I ask that right question? And Steve, how do I ask the right questions? I don't know. I'm not going to take any, I'm not going to separate you two again on that one. But asking the right questions. What do I put into a chat GPT to get that answer? What do I need to do in order to balance this spreadsheet, or this machine is broken out on the shop floor? What am I going to do to fix it? Right. So that's what I think where that's where the kind of, I think education needs to go right now is in that regard. Not so much information and output, take this test, but can we build kids that think? Can we train these kids to think and ask the right questions and be okay with not being okay? Stuff we do as adults.
Yeah.
And then there's another level of that too. I feel like information's at your fingertips, but is it good information? Is it accurate information?
So you have to be
You've got to
critical.
and check multiple sources. And and that's something that the kids are like, oh, I remember in high school, we had the computer labs then, the big like desktops. And going in, and I was doing a research project in English about Persephone, and I found a website from a dude that just made his own website himself. And the teacher was like, well, let's go look to see who this person is and if it is a reliable source. And I remember that to this day, because I thought, oh, this guy has so much information on this website. It's really easy to read, and I can just like copy and paste it because,
Right.
I was in high school. And we went and looked at the author and she's like, this isn't a reliable source. And I was like, oh. So then I had to keep digging. I had to keep looking. But it's something where I tried it. I looked for it. I was wrong. Okay, just keep going. Try again. Yeah. And I feel like there's just a lot of things where that's not the case, and they get a lot of anxiety about being wrong.
Because they're playing the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're playing,
and they're so
the
used
game
to that
and
game.
They're trying to get points.
Yeah.
I was actually listening to another podcast when I drove to Florida, and Dr. Peter Lilly et al. Was on it. I forgot whose podcast it was off the top of my head, but he's wrote the Thinking Classrooms book.
Mm.
And they were talking about questions and things like that. Like, the kids playing the game of school. Like a kid will wait 4 minutes and 20 some seconds before they know you're going to give them the answer because you got to move on. Right. Or Sophie's sitting in his computer lab looking up Persephone. And as a teacher, I walk past. Now she's going to ask me a question because she might have been on YouTube watching watching a YouTube short about a kid that's, doing some new dance, or on TikTok, right? So they're going to ask you questions. So you got to let the kids be kids too on top of it, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that I think needs to be reframed, for lack of a better term. And I'm not like saying, and I don't want to be up here saying, what you're doing in the classroom, teachers, is wrong. Change this. Here's a new initiative. No, teachers are doing some awesome things. I don't want to make sure I get that message out there. We got teachers in schools all across the country, big, little, small, rural, urban, middle of the city, underprivileged, overserved, all that stuff, that are doing some awesome and amazing things, right? But nobody knows about it. We know about the crappy teacher because that's in the paper and stuff like that, or that's the teacher that that mom goes on TikTok and complains about because they targeted their son or whatever it is. But we don't hear about so few of those teachers doing the really cool things and the awesome things. And if you think back to when you were in school, that teacher that was really tough on you, that you hated in the minute when you were there, when you're done, you're like, yeah, that guy was pretty good. That was a pretty good teacher. But the guy that was your friend all the time,
didn't learn a thing.
You knew how to get away with things, and you knew, but the one that was tough and strict and accountable is a good word for that. That kept you accountable. That is the teacher that you remember, and that is the teacher that kind of built you the way you are. And I think that goes a long way, and that needs to get out there. And that's what I also tell people when I do podcasts and I do workshops and stuff, is like, put the stuff out there. Your school's got a social media. You're doing something awesome, right? And you may have been doing it for 20 years, but send it to your social media person, invite your admins into the classroom, and the other thing that I tell them, and this is a PBL thing for you, Steve, how hard is it to take a Friday morning once a month, go to the coffee shop and get a couple pots of coffee and a couple dozen donuts and bring in some parents, some business people, some politicians to showcase your students for an hour on a Friday morning at 8:00, right?
That was that was
Huge.
an important part. And it was almost like I got to a point where like I'm not doing PBL any other way
Right.
than involving the community, involving mentors, doing it purposefully. Like that grander audience, as we talk about in that PBL lens, like it's so important and it's so authentic.
Yeah, those people, those community members want to come into the school and they want to help.
They do.
I mean, the majority of them. Some might not. Some might be too, but they're there, and it makes it relevant for the kids, right? Because, and again, those are the people paying your taxes. Those are the people paying the school taxes. Those are the people that they're invested, and the kids you're turning out are going to go work for them, and they're going to go buy products from them. So if I bring Steve in from the local Steve's Convenient Mart, now if I need a soda, I'm going to go see Steve because I remember seeing him in there, and it's going to be a little bit more. I come from a small town, so a lot of that is. But you even have that in New York City too, with the bodegas and the little corner stores, and in San Francisco, you have that. And so tap into that because those people want to come in. And what's the worst that's going to happen? They say no.
Oh yeah, and that
somebody
and
want to come in.
No, they do. It was like an every year thing. They loved it. So good. Yeah, Dan. Not to switch gears too much though, because I do want to make sure that we touch on your show, and so you do have the mic to prove it that you're a podcaster yourself. Really interested to hear about your show. I believe it's EdTech Clubhouse podcast. Would just love to hear more about it.
It's actually the Tech Ed Clubhouse podcast because I was a tech ed teacher.
Oh, sorry. I can read.
And we talk about a lot of things, Steve. I've gone a bunch of different ways with some stuff, but I love to bring people on and learn some things, all walks of life. And we talk about just what kind of is relevant in education at the time. I'm only like 70 some episodes in, and I'm growing, but I love to play golf. So that's where the Tech Ed Clubhouse came from. That's where the Clubhouse idea came from. And I taught Tech Ed was what it was called in New York State. And I like just that Clubhouse feel of like, just sit down and have a conversation. Like it's the 19th hole, which is, if you're not a golfer, that's the patio where you have a couple of adult beverages and rehash all the awesome shots and all the terrible things you hit and settle up your little bets.
Like the fifth quarter in football.
Yeah, it's just a great place to go sit and have some conversations. And so I just talk to people and I get some people on and just random ramblings of myself sometimes when I just need to get something off my chest. And I've been talking a little bit lately about engagement and what it looks like and what it doesn't look like. And that seems to be like a hot button issue right now. That seems to be like, and I think it's one of those things too, that it's something that's there, but teachers and administrators and parents and kids don't really like look at it like engagement. My kids are quiet and they're working on their project. Okay, that's not engagement. That might be.
Yeah.
But my class was chaotic and loud and noisy and a mess, and that's engagement too.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of looking at some different perspectives of some things. And if it works for you and resonates, great. If it doesn't, you wasted 20 minutes of your day, maybe.
Yeah. No, I love that. Something I talk about often is, and I did not come up with this, like maybe Katie Novak. I forget who, but like basically like talking about like stealing things, right? Borrowing things, but like just it's that concept of like engagement versus compliance. And which one is it? And it's okay that it's a little bit of the two, but don't confuse the two either.
Yeah, you know, I grew up in the late 1900s. I went to school, and you know, the meme that's out there is if you didn't cry doing homework at your math homework at your table with your dad, then did you grow up as a Gen Xer? Because you did things because the teacher said, "Hey, we got to write this essay." You wrote the essay. Mm-hmm. You know, and kids today are the same but different. You know, and I bring this analogy up, like if you watch The Breakfast Club and you walk down the hall today, you're going to see the jocks. You're going to see all those different kids and groups and stuff. They might be a little bit different, but you're going to see those. But the difference is the kids today in the classroom don't want to do the work unless it means something to them, unless it has they have some ownership. And it's so that's I think kind of the only real difference that I see from kids. But a 12-year-old's a 12-year-old's a 12-year-old. You know, I don't care. You know, if he was 1982 when I was 12, or you know 2026 when my students are 12. They're still the same kid, and they're kids, and I don't care if they're 5 or 18, because we spend so much time with them that we forget that they're kids sometimes.
And they still love stickers, even if they are 18.
So do teachers. Look at the laptops.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know. I now teach pre-service teachers. They're like kids too.
Yeah.
They're really big kids, but yeah.
I'm 55 and I'm still just a big kid. Like I like toys, and you know I'm playing with Lego on my table.
You're playing with Lego.
Oh.
Well,
you know, and so
here you go.
If you're not having fun, then it's work.
I love Lego.
You know, if you look over my shoulder here, you'll see this little sticker that I got. It's called,
Where's the fun in that?
Where's the fun in that? Which was my pin at FETC. Right. So
how did I not get one?
I don't know. But that was I learned that from my dad. There's a story that I told. I did a little pseudo, what was a Nightscape version of a TED Talk a couple years ago, and it was titled "Where's the Fun in That?" And the story goes, my dad was retired, and he was fiddling around in his basement, and he was trying to get this car radio to work, right, in his basement, so he could listen to whatever it was when he was pretending to weld or fix his tractor or just trying to stay out of my mom's way. And my brother comes in, he goes, "Dad, why don't you just go to Walmart and buy one for $20?" And he goes, "Where's the fun in that?" So I kind of brought that into my classroom, right? Like that like one of those aha moments when you think about it, like that's what you remember. Where's the fun in just buying a solution? Right? Yeah, he could have gone and bought a radio, probably a better one than this stupid car radio and 2 car speakers that he went to the junkyard and picked up. But he enjoyed the problem solving. He enjoyed the trying to find the solution. And and that's where the fun is. And if it's fun, if we're having fun, then we're not doing work.
So what that reminds me of, so I have this ongoing debate with people that I know about like to cook or not to cook. Like, so can you just order something and it'll be brought to you, right? But like for me, I grew up in a family where that's Sophie. I grew up in a family where like part of the fun was the cooking, like part of it was like experimenting, part of it was like making stuff that your grandmother made, and like it's just a part of you, right? And so I think there's room in life for both scenarios. Is that's kind of what that's what kind of resonated with me when you said that. Well, Dan, this has been super fun. I am, I'm just looking at the clock. We are coming down towards the tail end of the show here, or tail end of the episode. And we're going to ask you what we ask everyone on this show. What is under the hat for you? What is top of mind in education for you right now?
Right now, for me, Steve, to be honest with you, is the idea that our teachers aren't allowed to be teachers right now. They're so inundated with mandates and scripted curriculum, and that, hey, I got to cover this, and I just put something out on TikTok yesterday, and I don't know when this is coming out, but it's I put something out on TikTok like, hey, it's Friday, and So what if you didn't get done? Right? So what if you didn't get your project done or your lesson done? Did you make a connection with a kid? Did you notice a point in your lesson or your class where all of a sudden, you had to switch gears because something happened, right? You noticed a kid that was struggling, or you got a group of kids that were struggling. So why go on, have that human moment and make those connections. So I think that the practice of teaching, right, and the art of teaching is kind of going away. And I think we need to, going back to what I said earlier, where we got 20-year veteran teachers or more that are doing some awesome things, right? Because they're allowed to teach. They're allowed to go in and they don't have this canned curriculum that they have to read from. Or they do, and they're modifying it. So just being a professional and bringing that back and realizing that, yeah, it's okay to be a teacher. It's okay to, as opposed to being somebody that holds a teaching position, right?
Yeah.
And if AI can do your worksheet, then it's not a good worksheet. And if AI is not going to replace the teacher that's being the teacher. AI is going to replace the teacher that's holding the teaching position, just regurgitating information and reading off the slide deck at the front of the room, right? But they're not going to replace that human connection that we have to have in the classroom. So between being that teacher and then making the thinking and the learning visible. So how do I know that kid's learning something along the way? Because going back to like Steve's project-based learning stuff, when it came time to evaluate the project and those things, I already knew what the grade was because I talked to Steve and Sophie as they built it along the way. So I knew that they got it, and I was able to redirect because I had micro conversations with them along the way. I wasn't up in the front of the room. And I'm saying, again, there's a great place for direct explicit instruction, and I'm level 1, level 2 and interventions and all that stuff. There's a place for all of that. But if that's all you do, then you as a teacher are missing out because you're not enjoying and you're not making that connection that kid's going to come back in 10 years when you're need your furnace serviced, and that kid's going to come in your room, come in your house and remember you because you made a connection with that kid. And that might change, and it might change, and some kids you're not going to make a connection with, right? Some people don't like me. It's hard to believe, but some people don't like me. And that's okay. But so basically, Steve, my two answers are, be a teacher and be professional. And how can you make the thinking and the learning visible in your classroom?
Love that. Such a good answer. Well, Dan, we have one more thing for you, and we've never done this on the show, but I think it's super appropriate. Sophie and I are very interested.
I'm a huge fan of your daily jokes.
so she's interested in a joke, Dan. So I know you got this in your back pocket. You may have like a list somewhere, sticky note, but like very interested in a daily Dan joke.
Okay, so I'll tell you my wife's favorite one. This is my wife's favorite one, and I still don't know how to take it. So we're sitting on the couch the other day, and I asked my wife, I said, am I the only one you've ever been with? She goes, oh yeah, all the rest were 9s and 10s.
Well, snap.
So no, back to the dad joke thing. Like, if you follow me on socials, I post a dad joke and a selfie every day. So, and they're appropriate to put on your slide decks at school, right? So, because I had some friends of mine in the West Coast that use them in their morning slide decks.
They're fantastic. I do appreciate them. They always bring a smile to my face.
Absolutely, and have fun.
Yes, they always do. Mm-hmm.
And for those that are watching, listening, just so you know, like Dan's handle, like you just look up, and Dan, you can correct me on this, Coach Thomas Tech. Yep. That seems to be the consistent one across the platforms.
Yes.
So definitely catch those. Follow Dan. You'll just get like a good start to your day.
You get stuff.
And
you get lots of stuff for sure. I love it.
I love it. I got some things in the works. There's some stuff coming down that I'm real excited about. I'm hoping I can flesh it out and get some cool stuff moving. I got some ideas rattling around in this big empty space up here.
Yeah. No, love that. Love that. Dan, thanks again. You're welcome here anytime. Really appreciate your thoughts, your mind, your insight. But yeah, this has been fun.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure.
Awesome. All right, friends. Well, until next time, keep your hats on, but your minds open. Take care.